is The Men Who Built America by Jacob Motter. Chapter 1 topics include diagnostics. Vanderbilt visualized his weakness in his opponents. He then attacked the issue with what he thought was best, like a manager would do in a workplace. He resolved the issue by weakening his rival and making him more powerful. The next is entropy. Vanderbilt wasted money on fake stocks. With no one talking to Vanderbilt about this, he could have saved so much money because he had no communication. Chapter 2 topics include suppliers. Vanderbilt was an advanced supplier. Vanderbilt was the number one shipping of all goods in the whole United States in under 40 years. The next one is going to be conflict of interest. His rivals wanted to share the railroad tracks. They tried to underestimate the Sun and Vanderbilt and paid for it for basically going bankrupt. His rivals were stuck in the conflict of interest. Chapter 3 topics include strategic goals. One of Vanderbilt's was being tough against his competitors. He would beat up any of his business rivals that challenged him. Mark Cuban of the Mavs says this is how stuff worked back then. The next one is operational goals or short term. His operational goal was to take over the Erie Trackway. It was the most traveled trackway because it went from Chicago to New York City. Chapter 4 topics include risk. It was a huge risk that he decided to sell all of his ships and invest in the railroad transportation. This is a big deal because he was the number one supplier for people through ships. Also with that comes with uncertainty. What would happen if this didn't work out? You had to buy all ships back, but obviously it did work out. Chapter 5 includes the Nazi market. This is where people don't utilize their stuff correctly to make more money. And Vanderbilt was a genius at this. He found a market that was not being used right, example the railroad tracks, and invested in that and made millions off shipping stuff through the railroad people weren't doing. With him making all these railroad tracks, it created job creation. He had railroad tracks all throughout the United States, and with that, he created 180,000 jobs for the U.S. people. Next is learning development for Chapter 6. He learned and developed through the scam of the stocks by the Erie. He then developed and made partnership with Rockefeller to have control over the trackway by buying kerosene from him. The next is ideal bureaucracy. He was a higher up guy giving people work to do in New York City to build a track through it to make him more money, and there was little wiggle room to deal with. The next is plan change. Railroads were being created, and he knew that they would change the United States. He invested everything, like I said earlier, and made many money from it. The next is internal force. The force for Vanderbilt was the fake stocks that really shook his business up because he spent approximately today $1 billion on stocks trying to buy the Erie company out, and it affected his business a lot. Next is internal recruiting. With this, there's a family business, so he had his son get promoted to do the Hudson River operation, and since it's out of factory with workers, his son was the recruiter. The next is the realistic job preview. It's kind of hard for me to pick one out from the show, but I picked the ones that the New Yorkers who were building the tracks knew there was going to be hard work, and they got the real job preview doing the work. Next is contribution. Vanderbilt had workers buying all the stocks off the other train companies, basically sending them out of business, going bankrupt. So he had all the power through the railroad ways from his employees. The next one is job satisfaction. Rockefeller went on a very risky negotiation. He told Vanderbilt that he would have 60 carts full of kerosene for him, which he did not have. But he ended up getting it done. And he was satisfied from his work. Next is motivation. Vanderbilt was determined to be the number one seller on the railroad, be the richest guy. He was also motivated to take his rivals out. He made the biggest building in New York City at the time, too. The next is equality theory. I think this is important because he gave his son responsibilities, even though he's way younger than him. I think it boosted his motivation, backing up the equality theory. Next is referent power. It's like an influencer with respect. And this goes with his son again. Even though his son was disrespected, he still respected him, and they got back to rivals. And the next one is power. Vanderbilt had so much power that he literally made other companies fall to their knees and go bankrupt because of his power over the railroad tracks, shutting down the bridge and everything, where they couldn't get to New York City, the #1 port in the continent. The next is oral agreement. It was kind of hard for me to find one for this one too, but I put up when they set up ties with the refinery in Cleveland with the Sun and Rockefeller. There was no really documented of that. And the next one's the Grapevine. That's where Rockefeller was supposed to get on a train, but missed it by minutes, and the train crashed and everyone died, and then he was Grapevine to be destined salesman. The first one for Chapter 13 topics is going to be conflict. One, including Vanderbilt's depression. He ended up getting through that because his son died in the Civil War. The next is role conflict, where he's fighting demons with himself to get through that, and it weakened him in his business, but he got through that too. Strategic level of control. He shut down his competitors, like I talked about earlier, on the bridge, making them all fall to brink. And he gained power from all the railroad companies by buying their stocks and taking them over. And then screening, he built too many tracks, so he got back, only shipped out cargo, and monitored the tracks better to screen it. And then service, his service was taking people all across the United States, applying stuff, and getting materials across. And quality is Vanderbilt built fantastic railroad structures. And this is Vanderbilt, the businessman who built America.